What happens when a spoiled millionaire's son tries to choke the housekeeper's daughter, not knowing she's a trained boxer? This story will shock you, inspire you, and remind you that true strength doesn't come from wealth, but from courage. Before we begin, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel, Gentle Words, for more powerful stories that touch the heart and open the eyes. It all began on a blazing summer afternoon when the silence of the millionaire's vast mansion was broken by shouts echoing through the grand hallways. And though the mansion had chandeliers worth more than what some people earned in a lifetime, inside its walls was a darkness of pride and arrogance that money could never hide. And at the heart of this pride was Adrian, the spoiled son of the wealthy real estate tycoon, a boy who had been given everything except discipline, kindness, or humility, and who wore arrogance on his shoulders like a designer suit, never caring for the feelings of anyone below his imagined level. But that day his cruelty would collide with a force he could never anticipate, for in the shadows of the glittering home worked Elise, the housekeeper's daughter, a black girl with eyes burning with determination, whose mother toiled endlessly to provide her a chance at dignity, while Elise herself carried a secret strength, one forged not from riches but from years of bruises, sweat, and the discipline of boxing, something Adrian had no clue about. And as fate would have it, the spoiled son's arrogance met the boxer's spirit in an encounter that would shake every soul in that mansion, because that afternoon, while Elise was carrying fresh laundry upstairs, humming softly to distract herself from the weight of the folded linens, Adrian cornered her, his entitled smirk flashing with the venom of superiority, mocking her with words that cut like knives, saying she didn't belong in a house like his, that she was just the daughter of a servant, and that no one would ever respect her. And though Elise tried to walk past him with dignity, his fragile ego could not bear being ignored, so in a reckless act of cruelty, he wrapped his hands around her throat, pressing down with the force of someone who believed the world owed him obedience. But what he didn't know, what he could never have imagined, was that Elise's body, honed from hours of sparring, knew how to endure, knew how to resist, and while the panic of being choked set fire to her lungs, her fighter's spirit ignited inside her chest, and she looked at him not with fear but with the unyielding gaze of a warrior. And in that moment, Adrian faltered, confused that the girl he thought so weak, so beneath him, was not begging, was not cowering, but staring directly into his soul. And before his arrogance could register what was happening, Elise shifted her weight, her body moving with the fluid power of someone trained for combat, breaking free of his grasp with a sharp twist, her arms slamming his off like iron bars, and then with a precision born from countless hours in the boxing ring, she landed a punch to his chest, not enough to shatter, but enough to remind him that she was not prey, she was a fighter. And the spoiled son stumbled back, gasping in shock, the entitled grin wiped clean, replaced with the wide-eyed realization that strength was not measured by wealth or privilege but by the fire inside. And as he clutched his chest, wheezing, Elise stood tall, her voice steady even though her throat ached from his grip, telling him that money might buy him power in the world outside, but here, face to face with her, his wealth meant nothing, his arrogance meant nothing, and his cruelty had just met the spirit of a champion. And though Adrian was too stunned to reply, those who watched from the shadows, the staff who had long endured his bullying, felt the weight of justice in the air, their hearts pounding with the hope that maybe, finally, someone had stood up to the monster they had been forced to serve. And while Adrian stumbled away, muttering threats he could no longer make sound convincing, Elise knew this was only the beginning of a war between arrogance and dignity. But she was not afraid, for inside her beat the heart of a boxer, a heart trained not just to fight in the ring but to fight for respect, for honor, and for the right to stand tall in a world that too often tried to keep her on her knees. And though her throat burned and her hands trembled from the adrenaline, she knew one thing with absolute clarity. Adrian had just learned his first lesson, that the daughter of a housekeeper could be stronger than the son of a millionaire. And that day, in that mansion of glass and gold, a spoiled boy's pride began to crumble against the fists of truth. And as the story unfolded, viewers, if you are here listening, remember, strength, courage, and dignity are priceless. So if this story has touched you so far, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Gentle Words for more powerful tales that remind us all of the true meaning of character, because this is only the beginning, and the fight for respect has just begun. The night after the choking incident, the mansion that once seemed like a fortress of arrogance and entitlement felt different, as if the walls themselves had witnessed a shift, a tremor in the balance of power. And while Adrian tried to pretend nothing had happened, strutting through the marble halls with his usual swagger, deep inside he carried a humiliation he could not shake, the sting of Elise's resistance burning like an invisible wound across his pride, because never in his life had anyone stood up to him, never had anyone dared to fight back against the spoiled son of a millionaire. Yet Elise had not only broken free but shown him a strength that rattled his very core, and though he told himself she was just a servant's daughter, nothing more, the image of her fearless eyes and the sharp precision of her strike replayed in his head like a haunting melody, reminding him that his money, his name, his status, all of it had crumbled in the face of a girl who should have been powerless, yet refused to bow. And for Elise, the hours that followed were heavy with reflection, for even though she had defended herself, her hands trembled when she thought of her mother, the housekeeper who had worked tirelessly to keep her employed in this mansion, fearing what punishment might come, because Adrian was not just any boy, he was the master's son, and she knew well that in houses like this, truth was often crushed under the weight of wealth. But Elise was no ordinary girl, she was a fighter inside and out, and the fire in her chest told her she could not remain silent, that dignity once defended should never again be surrendered. So the following morning, when Adrian tried to corner her again, spewing threats about how he would have her mother fired, how he would make sure she never stepped foot in the mansion again, Elise did not shrink, she stood taller, her voice shaking not with fear but with unshakable resolve, telling him that if he touched her again, if he ever tried to lay a hand on her or her mother, she would not hesitate to show him just how much strength a so-called servant's daughter could wield. And for the first time, Adrian felt something strange, something he was unaccustomed to, fear, not of Elise's fists but of the truth her presence revealed, because in her defiance he saw the hollowness of his own character, the emptiness of a boy who had never earned respect, only bought it. And the more he stared at her, the more the reflection of his weakness stared back, yet instead of softening, his pride festered, leading him to hatch a plan to prove himself, a reckless idea born of arrogance. For that weekend the mansion was to host a lavish party, with business partners, politicians, and high society in attendance, and Adrian, desperate to reclaim his superiority, decided he would humiliate Elise before them all, showing everyone that she was nothing, that she could never stand equal to him. So he orchestrated a cruel scene, calling her into the main hall under the pretense of serving drinks, only to belittle her in front of dozens of guests, mocking her background, her clothing, even daring to mention her skin, his voice dripping with venom as laughter erupted from some shallow souls who dared to echo his cruelty. But Elise, though her heart hammered in her chest and tears threatened at the corners of her eyes, did not crumble. Instead she stood there, shoulders squared, and let him finish, let his ugliness spill into the air like poison, because she knew that when the moment came, when truth revealed itself, his venom would only condemn him. And then, as if fate had written it itself, Adrian took it too far, stepping forward to shove her roughly, his hand catching her arm with the intent to drag her like an object before the sneering crowd. And that was the moment Elise's spirit refused to remain silent, her years of boxing discipline guiding her body like second nature, as she twisted free and sent a clean, powerful strike into his shoulder, enough to send him stumbling back in front of every watching eye, his face painted with shock and humiliation, the gasps of the audience filling the hall like thunder. And then silence, pure silence, as everyone realized what they had just seen, the spoiled son of a millionaire, publicly defeated by the housekeeper's daughter. And though Elise's heart pounded with fear of consequences, what happened next changed everything, because from the back of the hall, a voice rose, her mother's voice, soft but steady, declaring that no amount of money, no mansion, no title, gave anyone the right to treat her daughter like trash. And though she trembled with nerves, the truth in her words cracked the atmosphere, forcing every guest to face the ugliness of what Adrian had done. And then, shockingly, a few others, staff members, even a business partner of the family, spoke up too, emboldened by Elise's courage, admitting they had long seen the arrogance and cruelty of Adrian, but never dared to say so, until now, until the moment one young woman's fists and fire had awakened their own voices, and Adrian, red with rage, tried to shout them all down. But the louder he screamed, the clearer his weakness became, until even his own father stepped forward, his face pale with disappointment, calling his son's name not with affection but with shame. And in that single instant, Adrian's empire of arrogance collapsed around him, because wealth may build walls, but it cannot silence truth forever, and Elise, still trembling yet unbroken, stood in the center of it all, her eyes wet with tears she refused to let fall, because she knew this was bigger than just her fight. It was the fight of every person told they were less because of who they were, where they came from, or the color of their skin. And as the night ended and the guests departed, whispers followed Elise like a storm, some praising her bravery, others shocked at her strength, but she walked out not as a servant's daughter, not as a victim, but as a victor of dignity. And though Adrian would never forget the humiliation of that night, Elise would never forget the lesson it carved into her soul, that sometimes, even in the darkest halls of arrogance, a single act of courage can ignite a fire that burns through generations of pride. And as she returned home with her mother, their hands clasped tightly together, Elise whispered a promise to herself, that she would continue fighting, not just in the ring but in life, to prove that true worth comes not from money or status but from resilience, respect, and love. And so the story closes not with a spoiled son's laughter but with a daughter's strength echoing like a bell of justice, reminding every ear that heard it that dignity is not given. It is claimed, it is defended, and it is worn like armor against the cruelties of the world. And dear viewers, if this story has touched your heart, if it has reminded you that courage can rise from the most unexpected places, then please, hit the like button and subscribe to Gentle Words, because every story we share carries the power to awaken, to inspire, and to remind us all that no matter how heavy the hand of arrogance, the spirit of truth will always rise, undefeated, unbroken, unstoppable.